Yo, what's good, everybody? Today we are here with our first ever podcast, just us as a duo, formerly from the Scarecrow podcast, but we branched off into just a duo for one podcast specifically. And today we're going to be doing a podcast on the Crucible and the real life Salem witch trials that took place in 1692 to 1693. And today I'm with my absolutely brother duo of a guest with Ahnell. And Ahnell, what you want to say, bro?
Alright, bro, let me just give you some background real quick about the witch trials. So, the earliest known signs of witchcraft happens between the 5th and 8th century and is generally recognized as pre-Christian paganism within medieval England and Europe. So, a main paganism belief that starts signs of witchcraft is an acceptance of magic as a valid means of spiritual exercise and expression. So around 1563 is when it becomes like a really huge offense to start practicing witchcraft. And paganism kind of develops into the idea that you can kill someone with magical powers, which then leads into witchcraft being kind of illegal.
All right, to add on to that, during the late 15 to 1600s, witchcraft was a fear throughout the entire world at the time. This was commonly seen in small towns as people believed witchcraft spread faster than anything else at this period of time. This mostly happened in places with Catholic churches. Judges would often be bishops, and during this time, series of crises occurred almost everywhere, all the time, including poor crop harvests, the Great Famine, and the Black Death, all happened in Europe. And people were looking for an explanation for the struggles that they were facing. And the main thing that people would point their finger at was witches. And this was encouraged by religious leaders like priests, bishops, just people with religious power. And their main thing that they would use as an argument was Exodus 22:18. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And this was them saying like witches do have lives in our culture, and that they could be like a huge threat to our society. So they were like, hey, this could be an issue, and they would spread that propaganda all over the world, and it became like a really big deal in this period of time.
So, getting into our first witch trial, I'd like to talk about this woman named Walpurga Hasmani. So, she was a widow in Germany around 1587. So, her story is that one night she was supposed to be meeting with a man, and she stated that the night that man was supposed to come over, a demon came to her house dressed in the same clothes as the man she was supposed to meet. And they ended up having sex, and the demon had her sign a contract with Satan. So she was kind of targeted because of the rumors from the neighbors of her committing acts of prostitution. And she was sentenced under the Bishop of Augsburg. And she confessed to murdering 41 children by sucking the blood out their foreheads, 2 mothers and laborers, and many other people and animals. So we see a lot of similarities with this case and the Crucible. So we see a lot how in these situations people will make up stories and just lie if it means they can potentially, avoid harsher consequences. So many people believe that her stories were kind of just made up because she was hoping to get a quick end to her punishment. But unlucky for her, she was still tortured. So we see this in the Crucible when Tituba, Abigail, and Betty start accusing other people of bewitching them, which starts like a huge blame game. And, they felt like they were in trouble, so the only way out was to accuse people. It just shows how people kind of just lie to protect themselves. Just like how Abigail leaves town mysteriously just to like not get in trouble, even though she caused, the trial in the first place, and now John's heading to be killed all because of what she started. Another similarity we see in this trial in the Crucible is how it was also under Catholic Church rule, which kind of shows a pattern of people in power kind of just taking control of the situation and using their biases instead of being fair. So the next trial I'm going to talk about is the North Berwick witch trials that happened in Scotland. So the time period this happened around was 1590 to 1592. So the story, to give a little bit of background, King James the Fourth was traveling to Denmark to marry Princess Anne, the Princess of Denmark, and there was a severe storm while he was going there, and it almost killed him actually. So as the king came back, he actually assumed that the storm was kind of just like an act of witchcraft, literally just because of how like unnatural it was. It was like such a big storm, like he didn't think it could be anything else. So we kind of see a lot of similarities here with relating to the Crucible and how people will put blame, on something with like very little evidence just to try to like make sense of it all, which is kind of hard to believe because there's no logic behind, a source of an answer. So another thing too, the king only believed it was witchcraft because he couldn't understand why it was such like a huge storm and just because of the fact that it almost like killed him because he saw it as an attack on himself. And just like in the Crucible, when Dr. Griggs can't find a cure for Betty and says witchcraft could be the cause, there's really no evidence behind that. It's just he has no actual, reason for it. And even though the storm started the king's path to the witch trials in Scotland, it was kind of known throughout that he really despised like all things about witches, just the idea of it. So this was like kind of like the only way for him to be like, okay, it's all right that I do these trials because I'm accusing, these evil people, even with no proof. Just like how we see again in the Crucible, how people with power just start abusing it because they think they're doing what's right. And that is a common thing we see.
Guys, so we're going to be talking about some psychology a little bit. So we're going to add how lying was used to a lot of people's advantages, disadvantages, and how people would manipulate others by lying. So pretty much back then and in the Crucible, lying was like huge. And it was really smart, but it was also really like dirty. It was like a really bad way to play it, but it was also, if you played your cards right, it was smart. So if, let's say back then in the real life Salem witch trials in 1692, back then, if you were even accused as a witch, your credibility was completely gone. Gone, over. It doesn't matter who you are. If you were accused of being a witch and they had like a mob behind it or just even a few people, you're most likely done. And even if you're proven innocent, which a lot of people weren't back then, if you were considered a witch, it was really hard to escape that. You were pretty much taken out of your position of power or whatever credibility that you even have in the first place. So using some psychology, people would really just try to manipulate and take some people of power down and just ruin their credibility. But another way that people would do it is they would lie so that they could protect somebody else that they love from being called a witch. Because as I said, if you were called a witch back then, you were pretty much already done. You were done. Because back then, there was no evidence. There was no nothing. There was just one word against another person's word. And back then, this word was so dangerous and so serious that if you were considered a witch, you could just consider yourself already dead. So what some people would do was that they would lie. They would lie and say, hey, I know you think that this person's a witch, but actually, let's say this person's a witch. And then they'll put all their attention on this person, protecting the person that you love. And this is extremely manipulative, but it would actually work. This would actually work. There were so many false accusations back then that so many innocent people would die being falsely accused as being a witch. And this was partly because people would lie to protect other people that they loved. And this would also create a butterfly effect. The people that were being accused falsely would falsely accuse other people. Everyone was being accused left and right, and none of them were witches. It's like people were being accused for nothing. You would wake up in the morning and you would have cops at your door. Well, not cops, people with pitchforks like, hey, you're a witch. And they're like, what? It was just so dangerous and so just ridiculous back then. Like, I still can't even believe that that was a thing. And kind of what I just said could also happen again. People would lie to protect their own asses. People would lie and be like, hey, I know you may be considering that I'm a witch, But did you know that this person was doing this? And they could lie, they could manipulate the situation, but at the end of the day, that's also what a lot of people would do, to lie to get their own, like, credibility, and to be like, I'm on your side. Just know that I'm on your side. I can't be a witch because I'm accusing this person of being a witch. So that automatically means that I'm safe. So they would accuse the other person of being a witch, and then she'd be like, no, she's a witch. But then be like, no, I said that you were a witch, so I'm safe. I'm obviously not a witch because I said that you were a witch. This was really, really important because this was just their way of just keeping everyone or themselves safe. So back then, lying was just really used to take down people of power, take down people's credibility, to protect other people that they loved, and also just to protect themselves. Because, man, back then, the word witch, was just like such a forbidden word to even say out loud at this point. At this period of time, if you were even thought of as a witch, like, it would probably be like the most horrifying thing ever, because it's like having like a death sentence walking around you at all times, because people are always going to be coming at you, or they're going to have like their eye on you the whole time. You'll never feel like safe. And this is also just so bad because, again, as I'm saying, this is about lying to take down other people, yourselves, or people you love, and not even being a witch, not even being a problem. That's why I think this is so messed up and so manipulative back then. And this was also used in the Crucible. I know we all remember the scene that was literally Oscar nominated. The scene where they accuse the slave of being a witch, and then she's like, no, you're a witch. And then they're like, no, you're a witch. This is literally everybody lying, and this is creating a butterfly effect. They falsely accuse the slave of being a witch, and then she falsely accused someone else of being a witch, and then they falsely accuse someone else of being a witch to save their own asses. This is literally a butterfly effect, and this happened in real life, and this happened in the Crucible. This is a main thing throughout the entire story. And also, I know this isn't about being a witch, but John Proctor, when they were going to hang him at the end, the girl was trying to lie and be like, say that you didn't do it. Say that you did not do it, so she could protect someone that she loved, John Proctor. She said, say that you did not do it. But John Proctor, he refused to lie. So he ended up dying. This relates throughout the entire story and throughout the real world events. Lying back then was so serious, and we didn't realize it until these were all over, and how many casualties that we lost throughout lying in these witch trials. So to wrap it all up, lying was used to take down people's credibility, to protect other people that we love, and we saw this in the Crucible during the Oscar nomination scene when they were all accusing each other of being slaves, not being slaves, of being witches in the cabin. That started off with the slave accusing Winona Ryder's character, and then she was like, no, and then it started like this whole scene, and that was all started off by lying. But don't get it twisted. They originally lied about the slave being a witch, so it created this huge effect, and yeah, it just created this huge domino effect. And yeah, as I said, lying was really serious back then. It was something that should not be taken for granted. How we don't lie like that anymore. We should really appreciate how we've learned and grown from this experience, and how lying just isn't taken that literal anymore, and how it isn't, and it isn't a she said, he said to death anymore. We should be really appreciative of that. And back to Noah.
So the last thing I'm going to be talking about actually isn't a witch trial, but it's actually something more current and more realistic. It's the Red Scare. So there were actually two Red Scares. The one I'm going to be talking about is the first one that happened. It was between 1917 to 1920. And what the Red Scare was, it was communism spreading to different parts of Europe and America. So this scared the U.S., like, intimidated them. So at the time, the Attorney General Mitchell Palmer and his deputy Edgar Hoover ordered arrest for potential communists. And they did a bunch of illegal raids, which were conducted on just suspicious groups. And over 4,000 people were arrested, and over 500 were deported. So, just like in the Crucible, both events started out of suspicion and just the fear of unknown. Just like when we see, like, Paris questioning Abigail while she was dancing in the woods, you know, just for her to lie, which caused skepticism. So, you know, coming back to the Red Scare, the government wanted to keep communism out of America. just like the judges in the Crucible wanted to keep witchcraft out of Salem. We see this time and time again, you know, high power, and they just do poor attempts in trying to stop it logically. And it is again seen with in high power just just seeing their judgment poorly used. Seeing how, you know, in the Red Scare, America broke a lot of laws during their time trying to get rid of communism. Just like how judges wrongfully killed and arrested townspeople in Salem. And it just kind of shows again and again, people always look to others. People always look to blame others instead of finding, you know, good outcomes of truth. So, to end it off, Spencer, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yo.
So, do you think, you know, obviously we've improved since the witch times, but even just looking at stuff like the Red Scare, which happened not too long ago, do you think humanity will improve off of theirself and we'll never see something like this again?
Okay, Ahnell, to follow up on your question, I would have to say that no, I don't ever in my entire life ever see the Salem witch trials or anything like we saw earlier ever happen again, ever in our society today. And the reason why I believe this is because back then, you didn't really need that much evidence to convict somebody of being a witch. Back then, you were just like, I think somebody's a witch. And they're like, oh, okay. And then it's a he said, she said debate. And that's pretty much it. That's how they determined who was a witch back then. So today, half of like our legal system and the way we would convict people of certain crimes and certain things, we would have to have evidence, which is something that they really, really, really lacked back then. They did not have evidence at all back then. And I think that's the most underrated thing about the Salem witch trials, is that nobody had evidence on anybody. Like, they had things to say, but, like, hardcore evidence, no. So, today, you would be like, okay, I think this person's a witch. And then the cops would say, okay, what's your proof? What did they do? And you'll never really have anything. So, in my opinion, that would just never, ever, ever work in our society. And I think I'm kind of happy, or I don't think, I know I'm super happy our society is like this today, because it kind of shows how we have evolved and how we no longer have a he said or she said thing that could honestly end up in somebody's death. Because back then, people would die from these. They would die from this. Like, people would die from a he said, she said debate, and it was crazy. So pretty much, no, Ahnell and Mr. Burns, I do not think that this would ever happen today in our society. Mainly just because, again, of how much they lack of evidence, and that's all we rely on today in our society. And we would not have to have a he said or she said debate for convicting someone of being hung or like death. So, final answer, no, I do not think that these would ever happen again in our society. Goodbye, everyone. Peace.